The icy wind of early winter in Sydney cut straight to my bones. I had just left a 3-hour Asian art auction in the Rocks, where the ancient cobblestone streets lay silent under the imposing shadow of the Harbour Bridge. For the past 3 years, my work as an antiques appraiser had been the only lifeline keeping me from sinking into the quicksand of the past. I stopped in front of a high-end children's fashion boutique, intending to buy a small gift for my niece back home. But suddenly, my feet were glued to the pavement, as if bolted to the asphalt, and my breath hitched in my chest. On the other side of the clear glass, under the dazzling light of a crystal chandelier, a man was kneeling on the polished parquet floor. With care and precision, he was putting tiny leather shoes on a beautiful boy of about 3. Beside him, a young woman with voluminous curly hair smiled with satisfaction, holding an expensive Birkin bag. The scene was so beautiful, complete, and happy that it provoked envy. But in a cruel twist of fate, every feature of the man's face, the way he frowned slightly as he tied the laces, the small mole behind his left earlobe, was familiar to me, branded into my memory. It was my husband, the man I had presumed dead in a tragic plane crash 3 years ago, the man for whose soul I had spent a fortune on memorial services, the man whose commemorative photo still solemnly presided over my cold house. I felt my blood freeze in my veins, then boil with fury, but I didn't rush at them or scream my instinct. As one of the country's top appraisers whispered, "Keep a cool head. Observe carefully before issuing a verdict on the piece in front of me." I stepped back into the shadow of a street lamp. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone. Through the camera lens, zoomed into the max, I clearly saw every gesture of affection he gave the child. The boy had his eyes, his nose. It was unmistakable. As for the woman, I recognized her. It was his former executive assistant, the one Sterling had sworn to me about time and again. "Don't be suspicious, baby. She's just an employee. She has a tough family situation, and I'm mentoring her." It turned out the mentoring was so complete, it included having a son together, the cashmere coat he wore, the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, and the handbag worth thousands in his lover's hand. With a stabbing pain, I realized all those luxuries had been bought with my money. With the money from the sale of the inheritance my mother had left me. With the money from the sale of the inheritance my mother had left me. With the money from the sale of the rare antiques my father had collected with such care. All to pay off the $2 million debt he had supposedly left behind after his death. I bit my lips so hard it bled, stifling the sob fighting to escape my throat. For 3 years I had lived like a ghost, caring for his parents as if they were my own, breaking my back to pay a dead man's debts. And he, meanwhile, was living like a king in this paradise with a beautiful woman and a healthy son, building his new home with my sweat and tears. The truth, naked and cruel, was like a sharp knife plunging into my heart, tearing apart the naive trust one once had. Sterling seemed to feel a gaze on him. He lifted his head, his eyes sweeping the window toward where I stood. I jumped, pulled my hood up quickly, and turned around, losing myself in the rushing crowd. I couldn't let him discover me now. I wasn't ready. A scene on foreign soil would only make me a laughingstock and alert them to hide their assets. I needed a plan, something perfect, ruthless, a plan worthy of the damage they had caused me. I hailed a taxi and said with a broken voice, "Kingsford Smith International Airport, please." Sitting in the car, I clutched the phone, still warm in my hand. That brief video now weighed 1,000 tons. I watched the city of Sydney fade away through the window, blurred by the rain, or perhaps my tears. I didn't know anymore. I only knew that the weak, love-struck woman named Serafina had died on that street. The woman returning to the States now would be entirely different. The plane tore through the night, rising into the dark sky, leaving the twinkling lights of Sydney behind. I curled up in my first-class seat. The silence and the soft scent of essential oils did nothing but fuel the painful memories. I refused the glass of wine the kind flight attendant offered and asked only for a glass of ice water, cold enough to calm the fire consuming me inside. I remembered that fateful day 3 years ago, the day the news reported the plane crash in international waters. Sterling's name was on the list of missing passengers. I fainted in the living room and woke up in a hospital surrounded by my mother-in-law's wailing. They found no intact bodies, only debris and unrecognizable fragments. The authorities identified Sterling through dental records and DNA results from a tiny tissue sample. At that moment, grief clouded my judgment. I could only hug his portrait and cry until I ran out of tears. I didn't have the mind to question the inconsistencies in that forensic report full of technical jargon. And after that funeral without a body, my hell began. Creditors arrived at the house like vultures to carrion. They showed promissory notes with Sterling's signature, totaling $2 million. They said he had borrowed the money to invest in high-risk venture capital projects and lost it all. My in-laws, Reginald and Eudora, collapsed when they found out. Reginald suffered a stroke that left him bedridden, and Eudora fell into a deep depression, leaving the entire burden on me. Eudora grabbed my hand, her face bathed in Serafina, my daughter. What a tragedy. Sterling is gone and has left us this mountain of debt. Your father-in-law and I are old. We can only count on you. Don't abandon us. Don't let them foreclose on the family estate. Out of loyalty, out of love for my husband, I nodded. I sold all the jewelry my mother had left me. I sold the luxury brownstone my father had gifted me before the wedding. And most painful of all, I had to sell the priceless antiques my father had collected and cared for all his life, as if they were his own soul. All to buy peace for my husband's family. $2 million. The figure danced in my head, mocking my stupidity. Now, connecting the dots with the image of Sterling's happy family in Australia, everything fit. That money was never lost in bad investments. It was covertly transferred offshore, turning into a villa, luxury cars, the opulent life he and his lover were enjoying. Me, Serafina, an expert appraiser capable of distinguishing the authentic from the fake in ancient artifacts, hadn't been able to see the dark soul of the man sharing my bed. I let out a bitter laugh, a distorted grimace reflected in the black screen in front of me. But that wasn't all. A freezing thought ran down my spine. I remembered the pungent herbal tea Eudora forced me to drink every night for the last 3 years. She said it was an old family recipe for vitality, that she prepared it especially to help me regain my strength. You've worked too hard for this family, baby. Drink this to recover. And I drank it with gratitude. But strangely, since I started taking that dark liquid, my cycle became increasingly scant and irregular. My body was always languid, tired, my skin pale. Although I didn't have any specific illness, I always thought it was due to overwork and stress. But now, a terrifying hypothesis formed in my mind. What if that tea wasn't to nourish me, but to sterilize me? They wanted to turn me into a mule, a money-making machine to support them, but they feared I might remarry, that I might take the remaining assets to another marriage. So, in secret, they destroyed my health, imprisoning me in the cage of loyalty they had built themselves. This cruelty went beyond all human limits. I squeezed the glass of water in my hand, my knuckles white from the cold. Misplaced kindness is like a poison. It kills you slowly and painfully. But luckily, I was still alive, and I had woken up. The plane began to descend, preparing to land at Dulles International Airport, just outside D.C. Looking at the city lights shining like distant stars, I took a deep breath. I was back, but not to remain the devoted daughter-in-law or the grieving widow. The taxi stopped abruptly in front of the gate of the stately manor, hidden on a quiet road in Potomac, Maryland, the place I had called home for 3 years. I took a deep breath, suppressing the nausea rising in my throat, preparing to put on the mask of the submissive, selfless daughter-in-law. Pushing open the door, the first thing I saw was Eudora lying on the expensive leather sofa with a white facial mask covering her face. She was yelling at the housekeeper in a sour tone that contrasted with her usual distinguished air. "How do you do things? I told you to buy Gulf shrimp, the jumbo ones, and you bring me this that looks like it's been frozen for a year? Are you trying to poison me?" The housekeeper, shrinking in a corner, twisted the edge of her apron, not daring to say a word. Seeing me enter, looking exhausted after the long trip, Eudora barely bothered to sit up. She looked at me sideways through the mask, her voice dismissive. You're back. Why so late? I told you there are few people in this house. Your father-in-law is sick. You have to learn to come back early. She didn't ask if the trip was tiring, nor did she care how the project in Australia went. Her first sentence was, as always, an empty reproach. I left my suitcase on the floor and sketched a weak smile, my voice hoarse from holding back emotion. Yes, the flight was delayed. That's why I'm a little late. How is Dad? Has he eaten and slept well these days? Eudora huffed before responding slowly. Same as always. A fortune in medicines, and he doesn't get any better. By the way, how about the Australia project? Did you get paid yet? Next month we have to pay your father's hospital bill, the electricity, the water, the salary of this useless girl, hundreds of expenses falling on me. Looking at the woman lying there, I felt a chill. This was the mother-in-law I once considered my own mother, the one who had hugged me crying inconsolably upon receiving the news of Sterling's accident, the one who had held my hand and told me I had to be strong. It turned out it was all a clumsy act to hide her greedy, selfish nature. In her eyes, I wasn't her daughter-in-law, or even family, but a money-printing machine, a pawn she and her son could exploit to the bone. I swallowed my tears, lowered my head, and replied, Yes, I know. I'm a little tired. With your permission, I'm going to my room to rest. Tomorrow I'll do the accounts and give the money to you, Ma. Eudora waved her hand, as if shooing a fly. Yes, go, and remember to get up early to make breakfast. Don't stay sleeping until noon. In silence, I carried my suitcase up the wooden staircase, each step heavy, as if I were wearing shackles. Case up the wooden staircase, each step heavy as if I were wearing shackles. The bedroom door closed. I quickly locked it and leaned against it, sliding down to the cold floor. This room, which was once our love nest, the place that held our sweetest memories, had now become the tomb of my youth. On the opposite wall, our large wedding photo still hung solemnly. Sterling's smile in the photo was so radiant and warm, but looking at it now, it only seemed fake and repugnant. I got up, went to the vanity, and picked up the frame with a photo from our anniversary trip. In the image, he looked at me with devotion, swearing eternal love. I smiled bitterly, a broken, tragic smile, and slowly placed the photo face down on the table. It was over. The blind love of 10 years, the misplaced loyalty, it all had to end. I pulled an old, basic burner phone from the bottom of my suitcase. I inserted a prepaid SIM card I had bought at the airport. My trembling hands dialed the number of Attorney Langston, my father's best friend, and the family lawyer. The phone rang 3 times before a sleepy but kind voice answered on the other end. Hello, who is this? I took a deep breath to calm myself, and my voice sounded firm and determined. Langston, it's Serafina. I'm sorry to call you at this hour, but I have something extremely important I need you to do for me immediately. Langston seemed to sense the gravity in my voice. His tone became completely awake. Serafina, what's wrong? Calm down. Tell me everything. I looked at the darkness wrapping the room, and every word leaving my mouth was like a bullet fired in the silent night. Activate the Heritage Protection Protocol immediately. Completely separate the assets my mother left me and the ones my father left me from the marital estate with Sterling's family, and I need you to secretly investigate the entire file of the plane crash from 3 years ago. I suspect Sterling is still alive. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Langston's voice sounded full of astonishment, but also trust. Understood. Don't worry, Serafina. I'm on it right now. The next morning, the DC area woke up with a fine, persistent drizzle, and the cutting cold of winter got into your bones. I left the house at dawn with the excuse of meeting a client. My destination wasn't a fancy office building, but a small coffee shop tucked away in a quiet alley in Georgetown, where Langston used to read the paper every morning. Langston was already waiting for me. In front of him, a cup of black coffee, hot and steaming. Seeing me enter, looking haggard with deep circles under my eyes after a sleepless night, he sighed slightly with a look of compassion. He pushed a cup of hot ginger tea toward me. Drink a little to warm up, he said with his deep, reassuring voice. If your father saw you like this, it would break his heart. I held the cup, and the heat spreading through my hands comforted me a little. I didn't beat around the bush. I put the flash drive with the video I had recorded in Sydney on the table. Langston plugged it into his laptop and watched it carefully, second by second. When the video ended, his face hardened and astonishment gave way to contained anger. He took off his glasses and wiped the fog from them. His voice trembled with rage. The scoundrel. I can't believe he dared to do something so monstrous. He fooled us all. He defrauded the law. I clasped my hands. My voice was strangely calm, the calm of someone who has hit rock bottom in pain. I want you to help me recover everything that belongs to me and my family. I don't want a single cent to fall into the hands of those grifters. Help me process the divorce and report their fraud. Langston nodded with determination and opened his briefcase, taking out a thick folder. He turned the pages, showing me the anomalies he had found the night before after my call. I asked some old friends in the judiciary to review the accident case. There were several suspicious points that back then, overwhelmed by grief, we overlooked. He pointed to a photocopy with an image of dental records. This is Sterling's dental history, used to match the body, but look closely. The date of the report has been altered. In reality, this record was redone at a private clinic just 6 months before the accident, and the person who did it was an old college buddy of Sterling's. I looked at the blurry numbers of the date, and a wave of indignation ran through me. His death wasn't an accident, but a meticulously orchestrated plan. He had prepared his disappearance perfectly, fooling the whole world, fooling the woman he slept with. Langston turned to the page of the DNA analysis. His voice became graver. And this is the DNA result. The tissue sample found at the crash site matches your in-laws by 99%. Theoretically, it confirms kinship, but in this case, I suspect a loophole. It is very possible the sample wasn't Sterling's, but a close relative with the same bloodline. For example, a cousin. I'm investigating if anyone in his family disappeared or passed away around those dates. Every word from Langston was like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. I remembered the months before the accident. Sterling traveled frequently for work, spoke on the phone in secret, and occasionally had unexplained expenses that he brushed off with evasions. Back then, I thought he was busy with work. Who would have guessed he was busy preparing his own death? I looked Langston in the eye with determination. Langston, I want to build a legal firewall. Prepare the documents to confirm my separate assets, including my mother's inheritance and the goods my father left me. I want them clearly separated, not mixed with the marital estate. At the same time, secretly gather evidence of his family's money laundering activities. Langston put a hand on my shoulder with a look full of confidence. Don't worry, I'll do it immediately. You've matured and become stronger than your father could have imagined. Keep playing your role. Leave the legal part in my hands. We will dismantle his conspiracy and make them pay for every one of your tears. Leaving the cafe, the drizzle hadn't stopped, but my heart no longer felt cold. I knew I wasn't alone in this battle. Behind me stood Langston, my father's legacy, and the justice waiting to be served. I pulled up the collar of my coat and blended into the crowd, ready for the next scenes of my performance. Back in the cold house, I began to play my role to perfection. I was no longer the generous daughter-in-law willing to pay any absurd expense for my in-laws. I started complaining about the lack of money, with a face always full of sorrow. That night for dinner, instead of the usual delicacies, I told the housekeeper to prepare simple dishes, collard greens and cornbread, sparse on the seasoning. Eudora sat at the table, frowned at the modest food, and banged her silverware against the plate. Are we starving in this house, or what? Where is the Virginia ham your father used to send? Where are the crab cakes? Do you intend for us to die of malnutrition? I took a bite of bread that tasted bitter in my throat and looked at her with red, teary eyes. I'm sorry, Ma. Work has been going really badly lately. On the Australia project, the client withheld payment and the company owes the employees several months of salary. I had to sell the last jewelry I had left to pay the bank interest. Right now, we don't have a single dollar left in the house. Please have a little patience and eat modestly. As soon as I get some money, I'll make it up to you." Hearing there was no money, Eudora's face changed. She didn't believe me, and her gaze scrutinized me up and down. "Don't come to me with tall tales. How is it possible that the director of a subsidiary of a major group has no money for groceries? Or are you hiding the money to support some lover?" I pretended to be deeply offended, and tears fell onto my plate. "How can you say that, Ma? For this family, I sold my dowry, my parents' house, everything to pay Sterling's debts. What do I have left to hide? If you don't believe me, look at the pile of foreclosure notices I left on the living room table." I pointed to the stack of fake debt documents I had asked Langston to prepare and had left in plain sight. Suspicious, Eudora huffed, got up, and went to the living room to grab the papers. The more she read, the paler she became. The debt figures of thousands of dollars and the threats from collectors made her tremble. She threw the papers on the table and turned to me with a look of panic and disdain. "How is it possible we owe so much? What have you done?" I covered my face and cried inconsolably. "I don't know. The interest keeps piling up. Now they're threatening to seize the house, the furniture. I don't know how we're going to survive next month." Eudora said nothing more. She went up to her room in silence, leaving dinner half-finished. I knew the fear of poverty and losing everything was starting to eat away at her. In the following days, I cut all luxury expenses. No more expensive medicines, no beauty treatments, and I even insisted on saving on the electric bill. Eudora was sitting on pins and needles. She feared having to support me, a useless daughter-in-law, and losing the source of income she had had for so long. Through a hidden camera in the living room, I saw Eudora start acting in secret. Taking advantage of my absence, she snuck into the study where the valuable antiques my father had left me were kept. She caressed each porcelain vase, each bronze statuette with greedy eyes. Then she took out her phone and called someone, whispering, "Hello, is it you? I have some antiques I want to sell urgently. They're authentic, the good stuff. If you can come see them and give me a good price, take them. I need the money now." I was sitting in my car, parked a distance away, listening to every word, every gesture through my phone screen. I felt a stab in my heart, seeing her dirty hands touching my father's sacred memories. They were objects my father had spent a lifetime collecting, that he treasured as if they were his life, and now that greedy woman was bargaining them away like vegetables at a market. I gripped the steering wheel, my nails digging into the leather. To catch the tiger, you have to enter its den. To unmask these people, you have to let their bottomless greed manifest itself. I sketched a cold smile, a cruel smile that had never appeared on my face before. Sell it all. Sell it. Every object you sell will be a sentence, irrefutable proof to send you and your whole family to prison. I will let you dig your own grave without me having to lift a finger. That night, a downpour fell. The drumming of rain on the roof was like the scream of my soul. At 10 o'clock sharp, as was the custom for 3 years, Eudora came up to my room with a steaming cup of tea. The strong herbal smell turned my stomach, but I maintained a serene expression. She left the cup on the nightstand with a falsely sweet voice. "Serafina, drink your tea. I just made it. Drink it hot, so it works. You're very thin lately. You need nourishment to have strength for work." Seeing her kind smile, I felt deep revulsion. I took the cup, feeling the heat, and replied quietly, "Thanks, Ma. Leave it there. I'll drink it when it cools down a bit." Eudora stayed a moment longer, her restless eyes scanning the room as if looking for something, before adding, "Remember to drink it all, okay? These roots are very valuable. I had to order them from back home. Don't waste them." I waited for her to leave and closed the door. Immediately, I got up and poured the contents of the cup into a glass jar I had prepared, carefully wiping the rim so as not to leave a trace. The next morning, I took the jar to Dr. Hightower, an old friend of my father's and a renowned expert in natural medicine. In his office, steeped in the smell of herbs, Dr. Hightower took the jar, smelled it, tasted a drop, and frowned. He took a sample of the sediment and examined it under a microscope. His expression became increasingly grave. He took off his glasses and looked at me with compassion and concern. "Serafina, how long have you been drinking this?" I replied with a trembling voice. "Every night for 3 years. My mother-in-law says it's a tonic for beauty and relaxation." Dr. Hightower shook his head and sighed with regret. "Beauty? What beauty is this going to give you, child? This is an old, extremely toxic formula used in the old days to sterilize women. Its main component, combined with other extremely potent herbs, isn't harmful in small doses. But taken continuously as you have, it causes ovarian atrophy, severe hormonal disorders, and finally, permanent secondary infertility." My ears rang. The floor seemed to sink beneath my feet. Permanent infertility. They had dared to do that to me? I clung to the edge of the table to keep from falling, and tears flowed uncontrollably. I remembered the nights I dreamed of being a mother, of cradling a baby in my arms. I remembered the times I had gone to church to pray, kneeling for hours, asking for a child. It turned out all my hopes had been murdered at their source by the very people I called family. Dr. Hightower continued, his voice trembling with indignation. "And that's not all, Serafina. This formula also has side effects like general weakening of the body, causing a constant state of fatigue and apathy, nullifying the will to resist. They wanted to turn you into an automaton, an obedient money-making machine without the ability to have children to tie you to them for life." The truth was so raw and brutal, I couldn't articulate a word. I had given them my youth, my love, and my respect. And what did I receive in return? A vile betrayal, a ruthless conspiracy to ruin my life. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to snatch away my right to be a mother. They wanted to lock me forever in this cage of fake gold. I wiped my tears and stood up. The deepest pain had transformed into a fire of hate burning fiercely in my heart. I looked at Dr. Hightower, my voice cold as ice. "Dr. Hightower, voice cold as ice. Dr. Hightower, thank you. Please keep this secret. I need you to write me an official report with your seal, analyzing the components of this tea. I will use it to claim justice." Leaving the office, the rain had stopped and the sun was shining brightly. I looked at the blue sky and silently promised my father and my unborn child that I wouldn't cry anymore. My tears were too valuable to shed for those beasts. From this moment on, the good and submissive Serafina was dead. Only a relentless Serafina remained, willing to raise everything to make the guilty pay with their own blood and tears. Everything to make the guilty pay with their own blood and tears. I would make them drink this poisonous tea, drop by drop. 2 days after discovering the truth about the tea, I received a call from Langston. He summoned me to his office, where he was waiting with a thick audit dossier on my in-laws' financial situation. Langston's office smelled of old paper and mahogany, and the ticking of a grandfather clock marked the rhythm of a time bomb. Langston put the dossier on the table and slid it toward me. His face was a mixture of seriousness and contempt. "Serafina, you have to prepare yourself. What you are going to see is not just a sentimental deception. It is a whole web of financial crime disguised as an honorable family." With trembling hands, I opened the first page. What I saw was an extract of my in-laws' bank accounts from the last 3 years. The figures were dizzying. My in-laws, who always complained about being sick and living off my charity, were handling money flows of tens of thousands of dollars. Langston pointed to the incoming transfers and explained, "Look, every month their accounts received large sums of money from shell companies offshore. The concept was always charitable donation or medical aid, but in reality, it is money from the shell companies sterling created to launder black money." I looked at the names of the companies and felt a tightness in my chest. While I broke my back working, selling my heritage to pay my husband's debts, they sat on a mountain of dirty money. They played the role of helpless elders, squeezing every last cent of my sweat while helping their son divert funds overseas. Langston turned to the next page. His voice became graver. "And this is the most terrifying part. Most of this money, after passing through several intermediary accounts, ended up in a secret trust fund in Switzerland called the Marcellus Trust. I asked some contacts to investigate. The beneficiaries of that fund are none other than Sterling and his son. I dropped the dossier, and a chill ran down my spine. Marcellus, surely named after his son. He had calculated everything. He used his parents as a cover, and his wife as a tool to earn money and divert attention, all to build a financial empire for his new family. His cruelty and calculation exceeded human limits. I looked up at Langston, my gaze hard, without a single tear. Langston, are these proofs enough to accuse them of money laundering? Langston nodded firmly. More than enough, but we need a little more time to consolidate the case, to make sure that when we strike, they have no escape. Sign this power of attorney, and I will work quietly with the Economic Crimes Unit. I took the pen and signed, my stroke firm as if cutting all remaining emotional ties. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted them to pay before the law for the dirty money they had amassed on my pain. Leaving the office, I told myself, Sterling, you like money so much? Well, I will use your own greed to send you to prison. To carry out my plan and bring the snake out of its hole, I needed the perfect bait. I drove out of the noisy city toward the quiet outskirts, to a farmhouse with a red roof hidden under ancient trees. It was the refuge of Elder Moses, my first mentor, the man who taught me to see the soul of antiques and the best restorer of ceramics in the country. Entering the brick patio covered in moss, the smell of baked clay mixed with the aroma of tea calmed me a little. Elder Moses was sitting by a stone table, holding an old teapot delicately, his white hair waving in the wind. Seeing me, he narrowed his eyes and smiled kindly. Serafina, child, it's been a long time.
Come in, have some hot tea.
I sat across from him with my heart in a knot. I didn't dare look him in the eye, fearing his piercing gaze would discover the murky scheme I was plotting. After a few minutes of trivial conversation, I gathered the courage and told him the whole story. Sterling, the betrayal, my in-laws' plan to rob me. Elder Moses listened in silence, his bony hands clinging to the teacup. When I got to the part about the poisonous tea and the dirty money, his eyes shone with unusual fury. He set the cup down hard on the table. His voice trembled with emotion. How can there be such soulless people in the world? Your father was a man of integrity all his life, and look at the kind of son-in-law he ended up with. A beast. I lowered my head, my voice broken. Elder, I came today to ask.
Don't tell me you want me to make a forgery to deceive someone.
In my life, I have only restored to save the beauty of the past. I have never been an accomplice to deceit. I knelt before him, tears rolling down my cheeks. I beg you, Elder, it's not for profit. It's to unmask a much greater deception. I need a perfect Moorish golden lustreware bowl, one that can fool the most expert eyes to lure Sterling out of his burrow. He is so greedy that only a treasure of that magnitude will make him fall into the trap. Elder Moses remained silent, looking into the distance. The internal struggle was reflected in his wrinkled face. He was a man of honor who hated fraud, but he also loved me like a daughter. After a long while, he sighed, Get up, Serafina. I understand your pain. I will help you, not to break my principles, but to teach that wretch a lesson in your father's name. You, not to break my principles, but to teach that wretch a lesson in your father's name. But recreating the legendary golden luster, the glint of the sun after the storm, isn't easy. I wiped my tears, my eyes shining with hope. I knew if he accepted, my plan was already half a success. I looked at him firmly. I know it's difficult, but I trust your golden hands, and I brought the most important things so you can create this masterpiece. With trembling hands, I opened a small brocade box I took from my bag and placed it on the stone table. Inside, on a bed of red velvet, rested a ceramic shard the size of my palm that emitted a soft, fascinating golden light. It was iridescent and deep in color, the shard as if he feared it would vanish upon touch. He whispered, his voice broken by awe. My God, this is authentic Loza Dorada, the legendary metallic reflection of the Alhambra. I thought I would only see this in books in my lifetime. I nodded slightly, with immense pain. Yes, Elder, it is the only authentic fragment my mother left me. She said it was part of a bowl from the Nazareth palaces that our ancestors kept for generations.
It is the soul of our family. Elder Moses put on magnifying glasses and examined every detail, every reflection amazed. For a man who had dedicated his life to ceramics, this fragment was more valuable than gold. It was the key to unlocking the secrets of a technique lost for centuries. He looked up, his eyes full of regret. Serafina, do you know the value of this? Just this fragment could buy a fortune. What do you plan to do with it? I took a deep breath, my voice steady. I want you to pulverize it.
What?
Elder Moses was stunned. His glasses almost fell off. Are you crazy? Destroy a national treasure to make a fake? I looked him in the eye, holding back tears. I'm not crazy. I know what it's worth. But if I keep it, it will remain just a fragment in a box. Instead, if we use it to create a complete bowl, even if it's fake, it will become the weapon that brings me justice. I need the original ceramic paste, the original glaze to fool Sterling and his experts. Only by sacrificing this fragment can I catch that greedy wolf. Silence took over the room. The elder looked at the fragment and then at me. Understanding the pain and determination in my eyes, he knew that for me, nothing was more important at that moment than avenging my father and myself. My father and myself. Finally, he nodded. He caressed the fragment one last time like a farewell. All right, I will help you. I will use the material from this shard and my secret techniques to resurrect this bowl. It will be a masterpiece as real as life itself, the sweetest and deadliest trap. I watched him take the fragment to the workshop and felt a knot in my stomach, as if my skin were being torn. Mama, I'm sorry. I have to destroy your memory to protect the family's honor. Please, from heaven, help me so this sacrifice isn't in vain. That fragment of destiny now had a new mission, justice and punishment. The following days, I deepened my role as the desperate daughter-in-law. I announced I was suspending my father-in-law's expensive medical treatment, replacing it with generic drugs covered by insurance. I fired the housekeeper, claiming I couldn't pay her, and took over the housekeeper claiming I couldn't pay her, and took over the housework myself, clumsily and listlessly. The house, already gloomy, became even colder and more suffocating. Eudora was like a cornered beast. The fake misery I had created fueled her greed and fear. Through the security camera connected to my phone, I saw her act one afternoon. While I pretended to be out borrowing money, Eudora slipped into the study where some antiques I deliberately hadn't sold yet remained. She looked around with cunning eyes, approached a fine wood shelf, and took a 19th-century Talavera ceramic vase. My father's favorite, she muttered to herself, her voice clearly audible through the microphone, full of resentment and greed. This stingy brat complaining over pennies. I'll sell these things and send the money to my Sterling, so he can fix his affairs. What can you expect from her? Your father's stuff belongs to your husband's family, too. I have every right to sell it. With trembling hands, she wrapped the vase in newspaper and put it in a large travel bag. She acted like an amateur thief, but the cruelty of her thoughts was professional. She felt no remorse for stealing her deceased in-law's property to benefit her son. Sitting in a nearby cafe with headphones on, I felt every one of her words like needles in my heart. Your father's stuff belongs to your husband's family, too. How could she say something so absurd and shameless? My father had treasured every piece, and now they fell into the hands of a vulgar person sold at bargain prices. Eudora went out with a heavy bag through the back door, where a rough-looking man waited for her. The man examined the vase and smiled with disdain. It's authentic, ma'am, but with the market down, I can only give you $500. If that works, take the cash. If not, I'm leaving. $500? But my son said this was worth thousands. Eudora haggled, but her eyes were fixed on the wad of bills the man held. Well, okay, 500. Give me the money quick before my daughter-in-law gets back. She took the money, counted it hurriedly, and put it in her pocket, beaming. I watched the scene on the screen, and a cold smile appeared on my lips. She didn't know that vase was a restoration I had commissioned from Elder Moses. In its base was a tiny tracking chip, and most importantly,
The entire illegal transaction had been recorded as irrefutable proof. Eudora, enjoy your $500. It will be your one-way ticket to a place reserved for the greedy and immoral. When I held the golden luster bowl in my hands, perfectly recreated by Elder Moses, I knew it was time to cast the final net. I locked myself in the study and opened my laptop to make a video call to London. I needed to talk to Arthur, an influential art dealer my father had done business with in the past. Arthur was a man with an expert eye, but who adored money above art. His greed would make him my best pawn. Arthur's gaunt face with his blue eyes appeared on the screen. He seemed surprised. I went straight to the point with an air of mystery and caution. I told him I possessed a treasure the whole world craved, a Moorish golden lusterware bowl from the Nasrid era, in perfect condition. Arthur laughed. His laugh sounded skeptical through the speakers. My dear Serafina, are you joking? Mana says pieces of that quality can be counted on the fingers of one hand, and most are in national museums. How is it possible you have something like that? I didn't give explanations. I simply brought the bowl closer to the camera, rotating it slowly under a special light. The golden and coppery shine reflected softly. The delicate motifs seemed to come alive. Arthur's smile vanished. He brought his face closer to the screen, eyes wide.
My God.
That sheen. That ceramic paste. It's impossible. It's too perfect. I pulled the bowl back. My voice was calm, but firm. It is a family heirloom from an important Spanish lineage. They want to sell it to save their business from bankruptcy. But the owner has a condition. He will only sell it to someone of true heritage, someone who truly values and wants to repatriate this national treasure. Arthur swallowed hard. He knew the huge commission he could get. He nodded repeatedly. Understood. I'll spread the word in the most exclusive circles where billionaires move. Trust me. In a few days, the entire black market will be buzzing about this. I turned off the computer and leaned back in the chair. The news of the legendary bowl would spread like wildfire in the world of art smuggling and money laundering. The world's Sterling longed to enter. He had always boasted of being an expert. Hearing about such a treasure, with the condition of heritage only, his greed and arrogance would skyrocket. Outside, the winter wind blew hard. I was weaving an invisible web with threads of greed, lies, and my father's sacred memories. I didn't know if I was going too far, but every time I remembered Eudora's brazen look, the poisonous tea, I felt I had no other choice. I got up and approached my father's portrait. I lit an incense stick. Dad, forgive me for dragging your noble passions into this mud, but to pull out the weeds, sometimes you have to get your hands dirty. The big fish is about to bite the hook, Dad, and I will be the one reeling it in, even if I have to bring down the sky. Exactly 1 week after my call with Arthur, I received a new message in my encrypted email. Arthur was euphoric. The news of the bowl had caused an earthquake in the clandestine collecting world. He had received offers from all over the globe, but one client in particular had caught his attention. He called himself Mr. C, a mysterious wealthy businessman based in Switzerland. He not only offered an astronomical initial sum, but demonstrated surprisingly detailed knowledge of the history and characteristics of the bowl. He claimed he had heard of it from a now-deceased mentor, and that owning it was the dream of his life, a tribute to his memory. Reading those words, I let out a bitter laugh, tears welling in my eyes. Mr. C, what a bastard. It didn't matter. The way he spoke of his deceased mentor revolted me. He dared to use my father, the father-in-law he had betrayed, as an excuse for his fake devotion. Arthur added, "This client is very determined. He says he wants to buy it not only as a collector, but as a gift for his son's 3rd birthday, as a family heirloom. He wants to use it to launder a large sum of money and consolidate his status in high society." I gripped the mouse, so hard my knuckles turned white. A gift for his 3-year-old son, the bastard son he had with his mistress. While I waited for news of him, he wanted to use dirty money and a treasure he believed authentic to build a bright future for that child. On the ruins of my happiness, this man's impudence knew no bounds. I replied to Arthur, demanding Mr. C prove his financial solvency before continuing. Tell him the owner of the bowl is very demanding.
She doesn't need a deposit. She needs to see his power. Ask him to send a list of assets or antiques of equivalent value he possesses as collateral. After sending the email, I stood in silence. In the dark, I was playing a game of poker with my own husband. He in the light as a mysterious billionaire. Me in the shadow as a desperate seller. He thought he was the hunter, not knowing he was running straight into his prey's trap. Sterling, you are smart, calculating, but you forgot something fundamental. The one who knows the prey best is the hunter who raised it. The knowledge about antiques you impress the world with. We taught you that, my father and I. Little by little you use our weapons against us. And today, I will use your own arrogance to end you. 3 days later, Arthur forwarded me a PDF file protected with a password, accompanied by a note of astonishment. Serafina, you have to see this. This Mr. C's fortune is incredible. He owns pieces even the British Museum would envy. With trembling hands, I entered the password. A bad feeling grew inside me. The file opened, revealing a long list of antiques with detailed photos and ownership certificates. On the first page, the image of a Ming Dynasty chicken cup, vibrant and colorful. I covered my mouth to stifle a sob. It was my father's favorite bowl. He used to contemplate it when he was happy and always warned me to be careful when cleaning it. He said it symbolized family unity, and now it was on the asset list of the man who had destroyed my family. I kept scrolling, tears clouding my vision. A Qing Dynasty goose egg vase, a scroll of the 7 sages of the bamboo grove, a pair of 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix vase is taller than a person. Everything was treasure for my father's collection. 3 years ago, before my father's death and Sterling's accident, they were safe in the family vault. I remembered that back then, Sterling often volunteered to go down to the vault to check and maintain the antiques. He said he wanted to learn, to share the burden with his father-in-law. My father trusted him blindly and gave him the key. It turned out that during those checks, he had been replacing the authentic pieces with high-quality forgeries and moving the originals out of the country. I looked at the list. Each object seemed to scream, denouncing the atrocious crime of that ungrateful son-in-law. He hadn't just stolen the wealth. He had stolen the soul, the memories of my family. He used those sacred objects as collateral, as a stepping stone for his dirty career, to brag about his wealth. Anger exploded in me like a volcano. I slammed the table hard. Sterling, you are a beast, I screamed in the empty room. I remembered my father on his deathbed, his cloudy eyes still worried about preserving a legacy for his descendants. He didn't know his son-in-law, whom he loved like a son, had already stolen it all. That betrayal was more painful than death. I wiped my tears. My gaze turned cold as steel. This list was the definitive proof, the rope Sterling had put around his own neck. He thought bragging about his assets would win the seller's trust, not knowing the seller was the true owner of those objects. I saved the file, made several copies. It would be the strongest accusation on Judgment Day. I promised my father in silence, I will recover everything, down to the last piece. These treasures must return where they belong, not to the hands of a scammer, a traitor like him. With the humiliating list in my possession, I began communicating directly via email with Mr. C, skipping Arthur. I created an anonymous email address, the guardian of memory, and started a tense psychological duel. I knew Sterling was suspicious, arrogant, and always wanted to appear like an expert. So I attacked that weakness. Sterling's first email was full of presumption and probing. Dear Madam, I am very impressed with the bowl. However, in golden lustware, there are many forgeries. I need more technical details. Does your bowl have the glaze drip at the base? And what is the exact thickness of the wall? Reading his questions, I smiled bitterly. Glaze drip. It was a term I had invented one afternoon, joking while teaching him to distinguish ceramics. I told him quality pieces often had accumulations of glaze at the base. It was an anecdote between us. It wasn't in any book. And now he used that amateur knowledge to test me. I drafted my response with a humble tone, but with the sharpness of an expert. Dear Mr. C, you are a great connoisseur. My bowl indeed presents that drip you mention, a sign of the highest quality pieces. Furthermore, on the base, it has a discreet incision in the shape of a crescent moon, which according to legend was the artisan's private signature for the Sultan's favorite. The crescent moon incision was a completely invented detail Elder Moses and I had added on purpose. I wanted to create a unique characteristic, a sweet trap, to reinforce his blind faith. If he were a real expert, he would doubt it. But Sterling was an amateur with fragmented knowledge, blinded by greed. And, as I expected, a few hours later he replied euphorically, "Fantastic. The crescent moon. I remember reading about it in some ancient text. It has to be authentic. Name your price. I will buy it, whatever the cost. I want it." He had fallen for it. He believed the fake detail because it satisfied his ego and his imagination. He believed he had found a unique piece, an unpublished treasure. His overconfidence had killed his caution. I didn't answer immediately. I let him wait, let his desire intensify. In negotiation, silence is also a weapon. I imagined him pacing in his luxury apartment in Switzerland, checking his email constantly, fearing the piece would fall into other hands. The feeling of having him in my power, of controlling his emotions from a distance, gave me a strange satisfaction. Before, I was always the one waiting. Now, I was the one pulling the strings. It was late. I closed the laptop. My reflection in the dark screen showed a thinner face with deep but burning eyes. I was no longer the naive wife. Betrayal had forged me into a warrior. Sterling, enjoy your last moments of euphoria, because your nightmare has only just begun. Just as I had foreseen, after confirming the fake detail of the crescent moon, Sterling lost all caution. He accepted the astronomical price I proposed, a figure that could buy an entire building in downtown DC, but his ambition didn't stop there. He wanted to use the purchase to launder the huge capital he had accumulated. However, to gather the cash the seller demanded, he had to move fast. Through the financial reports Langston obtained from shadow banking sources, I saw how he began to sell off his stocks, mortgage his villa in Switzerland, and borrow from loan sharks. He was a desperate gambler, betting everything on one last card, convinced he would win. But what hurt me most was seeing how he extended his greedy tentacles to his homeland, snatching his own parents' last refuge. One morning, listening through the bug on Eudora's phone, I heard her speaking with a trembling and tearful voice. "Sterling, son, are you sure? The house down in Savannah is where we've honored our ancestors for generations. If we sell it, what will we tell the family? And when we get old, where will we go?" Sterling's voice sounded cold and cruel. "Ma, don't be sentimental. What do you want that rundown house for? I need the money now for a big deal. When I close it, I'll bring you to Switzerland to live like kings. Sell it fast. I'm getting a good offer. Don't let it escape me." "But your father is sick," Eudora protested weakly. "Well, we'll cure him here. The medicine here is the best. Ma, if you love me and your grandson, do it now. You don't want little Marcellus to suffer like I did, right?" Hearing Marcellus's name, Eudora appeared hypnotized. She wiped her tears, and her voice became firm. "Okay, I'll sell it. Everything for my grandson's future." I took off the headphones and threw them on the table, furious. For him, the grave of his ancestors, his birthplace, his parents' refuge in old age, everything was merchandise. He painted a paradise to deceive them and leave them homeless. A few days later, through the camera, I saw Eudora sign the sale of the house. Her hands trembled, but her eyes shone seeing the advance payment. She muttered, "May the ancestors bless my grandson, so he does well. When he is rich, he will build a bigger temple for you all." She didn't know that money would never reach her grandson, and that the Swiss dream was an illusion. When Sterling fell, they would lose the house and have nowhere to go. Their blind devotion and greed had made them accomplices to their own ruin. I watched it all with a mix of pity and bitter satisfaction. They had brought their own misfortune upon themselves. After gathering the money, Sterling proposed doing the transaction in a maximum security bank in Zurich. He claimed safety, but I knew he wanted to avoid bringing a large sum of money to the US and keep the piece abroad to sell it easily. I couldn't allow it. My goal was to lure him to the US, to face justice. Here, I adopted the role of a seller with a strong sense of heritage, somewhat old-fashioned and eccentric. I replied with a proud and firm tone. Dear sir, I'm afraid you have misunderstood my wishes. This bowl is not simple merchandise. It is the soul of our people, the legacy of our ancestors. It has been away too long. I want it to return and remain on its land. I paused and continued typing. My principle is non-negotiable. The transaction must take place in America, at my residence, so I can pay my respects to my ancestors before handing it over. If you cannot meet this condition, I will cancel the sale and find a buyer with more sensitivity. I sent the email and waited nervously. I was betting on his greed and arrogance. For someone so desperate to own the piece, a rejection for such an absurd reason would infuriate him, but also stimulate him. Plus, he thought he was so smart, he wouldn't think an old-fashioned seller like me could be a danger. And sure enough, 2 days later, he replied, changing his tone, showing respect for my patriotism. You are absolutely right, Madam the Roots call. I greatly appreciate your sentiment. I accept doing the transaction in America. I will fly as soon as possible. I hope you keep your word. Reading his fake words, I felt nauseous. The man who had sold his conscience and his family now used patriotic discourse to deceive me. I suppressed my disgust and smiled coldly. He had bitten the hook. He didn't know that Dulles Airport wasn't a red carpet for a hero, but the door of death waiting for him. I had prepared a perfect trap in the very house where he had betrayed me. He would enter with the pride of a winner, only to discover he was a pawn on my board. I called Langston. He bit the hook. He accepts coming. Prepare everything. Let there be no mistakes. Langston replied, euphoric. Perfect. I've spoken to the police. As soon as he steps foot in the airport and makes the transaction, we'll close the net. The game was coming to an end. Sterling, enjoy your last days of freedom. The homeland you use as an excuse will be your eternal. Despite agreeing to come to the U.S., Sterling's suspicious nature made him pose one last demand. He asked for a carbon-14 dating certificate and a spectrographic analysis of the ceramic paste performed by a prestigious institute. He thought this was the final filter. If the piece passed this scientific test, it was 100% authentic. I read his email without flinching. Elder Moses and I had already anticipated this move. I took the original fragment, the one I had sacrificed, to the Smithsonian's Cultural Heritage Institute. Dr. Bennett, another old friend of my father's, received me. I put the fragment on the table and said sincerely, Doctor, I need your help. I need a dating and composition analysis for this fragment, but on the certificate please put a sample golden lusterware bowl private collection, not fragment. I swear, I am not doing this for profit, but to bring justice and punish someone who has looted national heritage. Dr. Bennett picked up the fragment, moved by its beauty. He knew my family's tragedy. After a long silence, he nodded firmly. Agreed. I trust you like I trusted your father. Science is at the service of truth, and sometimes, to protect it, you have to be flexible. I will do it. 3 days later, I received the certificate with the official seal of the Institute. The analysis confirmed the sample dated from the 15th century and that the composition of the clay and glaze matched samples from the ancient kilns. It was a certificate more real than reality itself, a death sentence for Sterling's greed. I scanned the certificate and sent it to him. I could imagine his face of triumph on the other side of the screen. He believed in science, in numbers, but forgot that the human being is the most unpredictable variable. He couldn't imagine the analyzed sample was real, but the object he was going to buy was fake. Upon receiving the certificate, Sterling felt invincible. He replied instantly, excellent. I have no more doubts. I have booked a cold smile. This certificate didn't just prove the antiquity of the fragment, but also Sterling's stupidity and his tragic end. He himself had signed his sentence by trusting blindly in what he saw, without knowing that behind that apparent truth opened an abyss of deception. The death certificate, I thought. It would take him to the peak of hope, only to throw him into the hell of despair. Sterling, do you like the truth? I will show it to you, but a truth so bitter you will never want to swallow it.
As the day of Sterling's return approached, tension grew, but it was the tension of the hunter before the shot. On the other side of the ocean, Sterling took the final steps of the gamble of his life to gather the huge sum of cash. Not only did he sell his assets and take out loans, but he did something terrible. He sold off the authentic antiques he had stolen from my family. He contacted notorious art traffickers in the European black market. Through the information network Langston had established with the help of Interpol, we followed every one of his moves. He sold the Ming chicken cup to a boss in Macau for a fraction of its real value. He sold the pair of vases to an anonymous collector in the Middle East. Every time I received a report, my heart shrank. It was my father's legacy, my family's soul being butchered and sold. But I had to endure. It was my father's legacy, my family's soul, being butchered and sold. But I had to endure. Every transaction, every invoice, every call was recorded as irrefutable proof of his smuggling and money laundering crimes. Langston called me, his voice urgent but excited. Serafina, he just closed the last sale. He has gathered the money and transferred it to an intermediary account in Hong Kong, ready to bring it to the States. Interpol has the list of buyers and all the evidence. His criminal record is already as thick as a dictionary. I squeezed the phone. Thanks, Langston. He has no escape now. That's right, Langston continued. When he lands at Dulles, he will think he's a king. He doesn't know shiny handcuffs are waiting to welcome him. I hung up and looked at my father's portrait. Dad, I've almost recovered your honor. Those who stained our family name will pay 100,000 times for it. Sterling packed his luggage with glee, dreaming of the legendary bowl that would change his life. He thought he was the winner, but he didn't know he had lost the game from the start. He bet with greed and betrayal, and the price could only be destruction. I looked in the mirror. My face was no longer that of a gaunt and sad woman, but someone cold and distant, forged in the storm. The afternoon before Sterling's return, I went to the market. I bought a large bouquet of white roses, the ones he used to say symbolized pure love. I put them in a crystal vase in the center of the dining room table. I went down to the cellar and took out a bottle of 1982 vintage wine, the wine my father was saving for the birth of his first grandchild. Dinner that night was suspiciously opulent. On the table, my in-laws' favorite dishes. Roast duck, crab cakes, fresh seafood. The aroma filled the house, but it didn't dispel the cold seeping through every corner. My in-laws looked at the table stunned. Eudora asked, "What is this feast for? The other day you said you didn't even have money for bread." I smiled and poured her wine, its red color intense like blood.
Eat, Ma.
I've thought it over well. The hard days are about to end. Tomorrow, everything will end, and our family will start a new stage. I wanted to offer you a good dinner, to bid farewell to the old times. Hearing the hard days are about to end, Eudora's eyes shone. She surely thought I had gotten money, or that Sterling was about to arrive to save them. She picked up the silverware enthusiastically. I knew it. My daughter-in-law is very capable. When Sterling returns, together you can handle everything. Eat, Reginald. Eat and gather strength to enjoy what's coming. My father-in-law, in his wheelchair, emitted some unintelligible sounds, but his eyes also shone with greed seeing the wine. I watched them eat voraciously. They gave me pity and disgust. They ate on my sweat, on my father's sacrifice, on their own betrayal. I raised my glass. Through the crystal, their figures looked distorted. They weren't parents. They were leeches. I took a sip, the bitterness running down my throat. I set the glass on the table, the sharp sound breaking the fake joy. I looked Eudora in the eye, my voice soft but sharp. Is the dinner good, Ma? Enjoy it and remember it well, because it may be the last family dinner I prepare for you. Eudora froze, a piece of roast duck half chewed. She looked at me, her instinct telling her something was wrong. She swallowed hurriedly. What do you mean? The last dinner? Are you going somewhere? I didn't answer, just smiled, a smile that froze her. Outside, the wind picked up, announcing the storm about to unleash. The atmosphere became dense. Slowly, I took a thick envelope from my bag and slid it across the table toward Eudora. She looked at it, her hands trembling as if it contained a monster. "Open it, Ma. It's a gift." She pleaded with her eyes, but I insisted. With clumsy fingers, she tore the envelope. A pile of photos fell onto the table. They were photos of Sterling smiling radiantly next to Kiana and their son abroad. Clumsy fingers, she tore the envelope. A pile of photos fell onto the table. They were photos of Sterling smiling radiantly next to Kiana and their son abroad. Photos of them shopping. Of Sterling kneeling to put shoes on his son. Sharp images of a happy family. A family where I didn't exist. Eudora's face went bloodless. She looked at me, her lips moving without making a sound. My father-in-law, in his wheelchair, tried to get closer to see, and then started moaning, drool falling down his chin. Before they could recover, I turned on the TV. The video of Eudora, hidden in the study, putting the antiques in a bag and haggling with the trafficker at the back door, appeared on the big screen. Her voice echoed in the silence. "Sell it fast to send the money to Sterling. To hell with his wife." It was like a slap in the face. Eudora dropped the photos, trembling violently. She looked at me, her eyes passing from horror to anger, and then to pleading. "Serafina, you knew everything. Have you been spying on me?" "I only did it out of necessity." I got up and approached her, whispering in her ear. "Necessity? Enough necessity to sell your in-law's memories, your own honor, to support your scammer son and his mistress? Enough necessity to put poison in my tea every night, so I couldn't have children?" Hearing about the tea, Eudora collapsed on the floor, terrified. "You know that, too. It wasn't my fault. It was Sterling. He convinced me." I started laughing, a bitter laugh that echoed in the empty house. "Yes, your precious son fooled me. The insurance, the whole world. Him living like a king, and me here working like a mule to pay his debts. What did you think I was? A puppet?" I looked at the two trembling elders, feeling no compassion at all. They had killed my loyalty. I have sent all this evidence to the police and my lawyers. Tomorrow, when your son steps foot in this house, it won't be as a savior hero, but as a wanted criminal. Hearing this, Eudora's eyes rolled back. She foamed at the mouth and fainted. My father-in-law screamed desperately, mucus and tears running down his face. But I didn't care. I didn't call a doctor nor help her up. The next morning, before the sun dispelled the fog, I was already at their bedroom door. A taxi was waiting outside. I didn't give them time to prepare or beg. Eudora, upon waking up, looked 10 years older. Seeing me, she knelt and hugged my legs. "Serafina, please forgive me. Forgive Sterling. After all, you were husband and wife for 10 years. I pushed her hands away as if touching something dirty. "Don't talk to me about affection. You sold that a long time ago. Now, please, get out of my house. This house is my property. I have no obligation to support those who conspired to destroy me. Get out of the house," Eudora stammered. "But where do we go?" "The house in Savannah," I said. "I sold it? That's your problem." I interrupted her. "You sold it to send the money to your son. Well, let him host you in Switzerland now." I tossed a paper with the address of the nearest police station at her. "Or you can go here and turn yourself in jail. At least you'll have food and a roof." My father-in-law cried in his wheelchair. Maybe he regretted it, but it was too late. I signaled the security guards I had hired. They took their suitcases and escorted them to the door. Eudora's screams echoed in the street. "Neighbors, my daughter-in-law is kicking her in-laws onto the street. Ungrateful. Evil." The neighbors looked out, but no one intervened. They had seen me caring for them alone. I watched them pull away in the taxi. The house in Savannah, their last refuge, sold for greed. Now they were truly homeless. When the iron gate closed, silence took over the villa. I felt an immense void, but also great relief. I had excised the tumor consuming me. Painful? Yes, but necessary to keep living. "I'm done with you too," I told myself. "Now only you remain, Sterling." The flight from Zurich landed at Dulles at noon. I didn't go to receive him, but through the tracker a private investigator had installed on his phone. I knew he had arrived. He didn't come alone. He was accompanied by a foreign lawyer and 2 burly bodyguards with the air of a powerful millionaire returning home. I waited in the living room. I had prepared a pot of exquisite tea, Sterling's favorite. The aroma filled the room, but it didn't alleviate the tension. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Sterling to the guardian of memory number. I am in DC. Where is the transaction? I want to see it now. I replied slowly. Welcome back. The transaction location is 18 Quiet Lane, Potomac. I await you. 18 Quiet Lane. The address of this very house. The house where he had lived, where he had deceived me, and from which he had fled. I imagined his surprise reading the address. He would think it was a strange coincidence, or that the mysterious seller had bought his old house. With his arrogance, he would surely lean toward the second option. He would laugh, thinking fate smiled on him, that returning to his old house to close the biggest deal of his life was a sign of his absolute victory. He would never believe his naive wife was behind it all. Victory. He would never believe his naive wife was behind it all. Through the security camera, I saw a black Mercedes arrive. Sterling got out, impeccable, in a designer suit, looking at the house with disdain, and then ringing the bell. I got up, adjusting my blue silk dress, the color of the golden lusterware, the color of the sky after the storm. I went to open the door not to receive a husband, but an enemy entering the final trap. The heavy wooden door opened. Sterling was there. His smile vanished upon seeing me, Serafina, and not an unknown old woman. His eyes opened wide, as if seeing a ghost. I smiled. A soft smile, but lethal. Hello, Sterling. Been a long time. For an instant, I saw panic in his eyes. But quickly, his survivor instinct returned a fake calm to him. He signaled his companions to stay back, whispering it was a family matter he would resolve himself. He still thought it was a coincidence, or that I was clinging to the house to make him pity me. The gate closed, trapping him in the cage I had built. He entered the patio, his expensive leather shoes echoing on the tile floor. He looked around with a mix of curiosity and contempt. You're still here? His cold voice asked, as if speaking to a servant. I thought my mother had sold this house, or are you trying some trick to keep the little that's left? I didn't answer, simply invited him in with a solemn gesture. Come in, please. We're not going to talk in the patio. The tea is ready, the flowers in place. Only you are missing. Sterling frowned. My calm unsettled him. He entered the living room. His eyes landed on the white roses on the open bottle of vintage wine. A mocking smile appeared on his lips. What detail? White roses. Expensive wine? Are you trying to win me back with these cheap tricks? Or do you want to beg me for charity? He sat in the main armchair with an air of superiority. For him, I was still the same submissive woman. He didn't know the woman in front of him had been forged in the fire of betrayal, sharper than any knife. Look, Serafina, he said, drumming his fingers on the table. I don't have time for your dramas. I came to see the new owner of this house for an important deal. Be good and disappear. Don't force me to call security to throw you out. I looked at him feeling a mix of pity and disgust. The man I had loved more than my life now treated me like trash. He didn't ask about his parents or how I had survived these 3 years. He only thought about money and appearances. I sat across from him with my back straight. I looked him in the eye, my gaze firm. You wanted to meet the owner of this house? You wanted to meet the seller of the legendary golden luster bowl. You have her in front of you. My statement fell into silence, but Sterling only responded with loud laughter, as if he had heard the joke of the century. You? The seller? He said, wiping a tear of laughter. Serafina, have you lost your mind? A woman like you who had to ask my mother for money, even for groceries, is going to possess a national treasure? Who are you trying to fool? Is going to possess a national treasure? Who are you trying to fool? He leaned forward. I see. You heard I was coming to buy antiques, and you want to get some money. How much do you want? $100,000? $200,000?
Take it as payment for taking care of my parents. Take it and get out." I remained impassive. When he finished laughing, I spoke, my voice calm, but with an authority that erased his smile. "Are you done? Good. Now let me tell you a truth. This house, this land, and even your life are in my—" I took a stack of documents from a drawer and threw them on the table. They were the deeds to the house in my name and a copy of the dating certificate of the bowl I had sent him. Sterling picked it up, his face paling by the moment. He looked up, his confidence beginning to wobble. "How you have this, the mysterious seller. It was you?" "Yes, it was me," I replied, my voice icy. "I was the one corresponding with you, who taught you to distinguish golden lustware, and who is what you desire most. Did you think it was a coincidence?" He leaned back in the chair, breathing with difficulty. Fear was starting to take over him, but greed was still stronger. "Well, if you are the seller, better. Between family, we will understand each other. Give me the piece, and I will pay you. Consider yourself lucky." He still didn't realize he was on the edge of the abyss. He still believed money solved everything. I felt pity for his ignorance. "Pay with hard cash?" I repeated with a bitter smile. "Do you plan to pay me with the money you got underselling my father's antiques, or with the money you scammed from the insurance with your own fake death?" My question was like a bucket of cold water. Sterling jumped. What are you saying? You know?" "I know everything," I interrupted him, my gaze sharp. "I know you live in Australia with Kiana, that you have a 3-year-old son, and that you convinced your mother to sell the family home. Did you think you could fool me? You were wrong, Sterling. I haven't spent these 3 years crying." The air in the room was unbreathable. Sterling stared at me, sweat beading on his forehead. He realized I was no longer the lamb he could handle at will, but a wolf showing its teeth. He tried to regain control, changing to a soft and conciliatory tone. "Serafina, baby, this is a misunderstanding. I know you're angry, but I had my reasons. I did it all to build a future, to give a better life to you and my parents. Look, now I'm a successful man, and I've come back for you. The thing with Kiana was a mistake. I'll fix it. Give me the bowl. I'll sell it for a fortune, and we'll have lots of money. I'll give you whatever you want." Watching him act turned my stomach. Did he really think I was stupid enough to forgive his crimes for money and affection? I didn't answer. I simply poured him a cup of tea, the same tea I had made him before his fateful flight. "Drink. It's your favorite, remember?" He hesitated, fearing I had poisoned it, as his mother had done to me. "What's wrong? Are you scared?" I smiled with disdain, drinking from my own cup. "Relax. I'm not as ruinous as your family. I want you to live to see the price of your actions." I set the cup down and looked him in the eye. "Sterling, one last question. In these 3 years, while you were with your mistress and your son spending my money, did you ever feel, even for an instant, remorse or pity for me?" Sterling averted his gaze, then looked at me with infinite cruelty. His charade was over. "Remorse?" he mocked. "How naive you are, Serafina. In business and in love, the smart survive and the fools perish. You are submissive and stupid. The smart survive and the fools perish. You are submissive and stupid, so it was your turn to suffer. That's the law of life. I don't owe you anything. Love is the cheapest thing there is. Only money and power are eternal." His answer was the final knife that cut the last thread binding me to him. I no longer felt pain, only absolute emptiness and contempt. I nodded and smiled, a smile of liberation. "Well said. Thanks for showing me your true face. Then, today we settle accounts. You want the bowl? Okay, I'll give it to you." I got up and went to the display cabinet where I kept an elegant red brocade box. Sterling followed me with his gaze, his eyes shining with greed. He had forgotten all caution. He only saw the prize, not the scythe looming over him. I put the box on the table. Sterling lunged and opened it with trembling hands. The golden luster bowl appeared dazzling. He picked it up, caressed it, muttering praises. In his eyes was only the obsession of an addict and the calculation of a merchant. "It's perfect. Here is the crescent moon," he whispered,
absorbed in his fantasy of victory. He turned to me triumphant. Okay, name the price. I have the money ready. When I sell it, I'll give you a good sum so you can retire as payment for taking care of the house. I said nothing. I took out my phone and put it on the table with the screen facing him. Before talking about money, I think you should take this call. It's more important than that bowl. Just then, Sterling's luxury phone started ringing. It was a call from Europe from his main contact in the black market. He answered, putting it on speaker to impress me. Hello, Mr. Smith, I'm in DC. Before he could finish, a furious and terrified voice shouted in English from the other side. Sterling, you damn scammer. You tricked me. All the merchandise you sold me, the chicken cup, the vases, everything has been confiscated by Interpol and the police. They say it's stolen material with an international search warrant. Sterling's face fell apart. What? What are you talking about? My merchandise was family inheritance with papers. Inheritance, my ass. They have proof it was stolen from the Fan family in America. I've been arrested. My accounts are frozen. And you know what? I snitched on you. Your accounts in Switzerland have just been blocked by international court order. You're finished, you son of a... The call cut off. Sterling's phone fell to the floor and shattered. He stood paralyzed. His face without a drop of blood. His gaze lost. Accounts blocked. Merchandise confiscated. He muttered like an automaton. All his money, everything he had risked, had evaporated. Not only was he ruined, but he had a huge debt and an international arrest warrant. I stood up crossing my arms. And an international arrest warrant. I stood up crossing my arms. What's wrong? Good news from your partner? Did your money vanish? Sterling turned to me. The fear in his eyes turning into blind fury, he pointed at me screaming. It was you. You warned the police. You set a trap for me. Yes, it was me, I replied. My voice firm. I sent all the ownership documents to Interpol months ago. I waited for you to sell everything so you would commit the crimes of receiving stolen goods and laundering. Did you think I was going to let you sell my father's sweat and tears? Sterling stumbled and fell into a chair. He looked at the bowl in his hands, his last hope. He hugged it like a lifesaver in a sea of fire. I still have this. It's authentic. I'll sell it. I'll start over. I looked at him with pity, a ruined gambler clinging to a fake lottery ticket. Hug it, Sterling. See if it saves you from the handcuffs waiting outside. While Sterling plunged into panic, the living room door burst open. Several figures in police uniforms entered. In front, Langston, with a thick dossier in his hand, followed by agents from the Economic Crimes Unit and an Interpol representative. The atmosphere froze. Sterling's two bodyguards raised their hands, surrendering. Sterling stood petrified in the center of the room. An agent stepped forward and read the warrant with a clear voice. Sterling Garcia is under arrest for crimes of fraud, money laundering, and illicit trafficking of cultural goods internationally. Anything you say can be used against you. The metallic and cold sound of the handcuffs closing resonated in the room. Sterling reacted screaming and struggling like a madman. I'm not the victim. It was her. That evil woman set a trap for me. The bowl is fake. She tricked me. He lunged at me with bloodshot eyes, but the agents held him back. I remained seated, drinking my tea. Langston approached. You are mistaken, Mr. Garcia. We are not arresting you for this fake bowl. This was just the bait. We are arresting you for faking your death 3 years ago to collect $1 million insurance policy, for laundering money through your parents' accounts, and for the long list of antiques you stole from your wife's family and sold abroad. Hearing this, Sterling collapsed, falling to his knees. He looked at me pleadingly. Serafina, I made a mistake. Help me, please. Tell them we are husband and wife. I got up and approached him. The man I had once adored was now a cowardly criminal. I shook my head. Husband and wife. That relationship died the day you went to Australia with your mistress, the day you left me paying your debts. Today, I am only helping justice be done. While they took him away, his eyes remained fixed on the bowl on the table, his last and fragile hope. Don't touch it, he screamed. It's authentic. I have the certificate. It's mine. I looked at him and then slowly picked up the bowl. The light reflected on its golden glaze, creating a hypnotic beauty. I turned it in my hands and then looked Sterling in the eye with a sad smile. Do you still think it's authentic, Sterling? You believe in a paper, in your eyes, but you forget that the one who created this illusion was me. You're lying, Sterling stammered. Let me show you its true value. In your eyes, but you forget that the one who created this illusion was me. You're lying, Sterling stammered. Let me show you its true value, I said, and let go. The beautiful, golden luster bowl fell to the tile floor. Crack. The sharp and tearing sound broke the silence. The shards jumped everywhere, revealing the new and untreated ceramic paste under the sophisticated layer of aged glaze. Sterling opened his eyes and mouth. A scream choked in his throat. He looked at the pieces as if seeing his own life shattered.
Why?
Why did you break it? I dusted off my hands. Because it's fake. Just like your personality. Like your love. Like the happy family you set up abroad. Everything is a farce. A shiny layer to hide a rotten core. I used an authentic fragment from my mother. I sacrificed my most sacred memory to create this trap and catch the greedy demon inside you. Do you see now? That for which you risked your life is nothing more than a handful of worthless clay. Sterling buried his head, trembling. That truth was crueler than any sentence. He had lost. He lost the money and the battle of wits against the woman he had always underestimated. They took him away, humiliated. The jingling of the handcuffs was the requiem of a wasted life. The trial was held 3 months later and captured the media's attention. I went to court not as a victim wife, but as the protector of my family's legacy and the key witness. Calmly, I presented every proof. You're finished, you son of a... The call cut off. Sterling's phone fell to the floor and shattered. He stood paralyzed. His face without a drop of blood. His gaze lost. Accounts blocked. Merchandise confiscated. He muttered like an automaton. All his money, everything he had risked, had evaporated. Not only was he ruined, but he had a huge debt and an international arrest warrant. I stood up crossing my arms. And an international arrest warrant. I stood up crossing my arms. What's wrong? Good news from your partner? Did your money vanish? Sterling turned to me. The fear in his eyes turning into blind fury, he pointed at me screaming. It was you. You warned the police. You set a trap for me. Yes, it was me, I replied. My voice firm. I sent all the ownership documents to Interpol months ago. I waited for you to sell everything so you would commit the crimes of receiving stolen goods and laundering. Did you think I was going to let you sell my father's sweat and tears? Sterling stumbled and fell into a chair. He looked at the bowl in his hands, his last hope. He hugged it like a lifesaver in a sea of fire.
I still have this.
It's authentic. I'll sell it. I'll start over. I looked at him with pity, a ruined gambler clinging to a fake lottery ticket. Hug it, Sterling. See if it saves you from the handcuffs waiting outside. While Sterling plunged into panic, the living room door burst open. Several figures in police uniforms entered. In front, Langston, with a thick dossier in his hand, followed by agents from the Economic Crimes Unit and an Interpol representative. The atmosphere froze. Sterling's 2 bodyguards raised their hands, surrendering. Sterling stood petrified in the center of the room. An agent stepped forward and read the warrant with a clear voice. Sterling Garcia is under arrest for crimes of fraud, money laundering, and illicit trafficking of cultural goods internationally. Anything you say can be used against you. The metallic and cold sound of the handcuffs closing resonated in the room. Sterling reacted screaming and struggling like a madman. I'm not the victim. It was her. That evil woman set a trap for me. The bowl is fake. She tricked me. He lunged at me with bloodshot eyes, but the agents held him back. I remained seated, drinking my tea. Langston approached. You are mistaken, Mr. Garcia. We are not arresting you for this fake bowl. This was just the bait. We are arresting you for faking your death 3 years ago to collect $1 million insurance policy, for laundering money through your parents' accounts, and for the long list of antiques you stole from your wife's family and sold abroad.
Hearing this, Sterling collapsed, falling to his knees. He looked at me pleadingly. Serafina, I made a mistake. Help me, please. Tell them we are husband and wife. I got up and approached him. The man I had once adored was now a cowardly criminal. I shook my head. Husband and wife. That relationship died the day you went to Australia with your mistress, the day you left me paying your debts. Today, I am only helping justice be done. While they took him away, his eyes remained fixed on the bowl on the table, his last and fragile hope. Don't touch it, he screamed. It's authentic. I have the certificate. It's mine. I looked at him and then slowly picked up the bowl. The light reflected on its golden glaze, creating a hypnotic beauty. I turned it in my hands and then looked Sterling in the eye with a sad smile. Do you still think it's authentic, Sterling? You believe in a paper, in your eyes, but you forget that the one who created this illusion was me. You're lying, Sterling stammered. Let me show you its true value. In your eyes, but you forget that the one who created this illusion was me. You're lying, Sterling stammered. Let me show you its true value, I said, and let go. The beautiful, golden luster bowl fell to the tile floor. Crack. The sharp and tearing sound broke the silence. The shards jumped everywhere, revealing the new and untreated ceramic paste under the sophisticated layer of aged glaze. Sterling opened his eyes and mouth. A scream choked in his throat. He looked at the pieces as if seeing his own life shattered. Why? Why did you break it? I dusted off my hands. Because it's fake. Just like your personality. Like your love. Like the happy family you set up abroad. Everything is a farce. A shiny layer to hide a rotten core. I used an authentic fragment from my mother. I sacrificed my most sacred memory to create this trap and catch the greedy demon inside you. Do you see now? That for which you risked your life is nothing more than a handful of worthless clay. Sterling buried his head, trembling. That truth was crueler than any sentence. He had lost. He lost the money and the battle of wits against the woman he had always underestimated. They took him away, humiliated. The jingling of the handcuffs was the requiem of a wasted life. The trial was held 3 months later and captured the media's attention. I went to court not as a victim wife, but as the protector of my family's legacy and the key witness. Calmly, I presented every proof. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Sterling pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison for fraud, laundering, and antiquities trafficking. Kiana, his mistress, was extradited and sentenced to 15 years in prison as an accomplice. But the most tragic end was that of my in-laws. After being evicted from the house, without shelter, and with the shock of their son's conviction, Reginald suffered another stroke that left him completely paralyzed. Eudora, the woman who had spent her life calculating, found herself with nothing, pushing her husband's wheelchair in a depressing public nursing home on the outskirts. I want to see them one last time. In the damp room, Eudora, aged and gray, was feeding her husband. Seeing me, she tried to ask me for money, but meeting my icy gaze, she lowered her head, her tears falling into the bowl of porridge. I said nothing, nor gave them a cent. I only left an old photo of their family on the table, from when greed hadn't yet devoured their conscience. That was the cruelest punishment, living with remorse, remembering a lost past. They sowed winds and now reaped whirlwinds. Loneliness, poverty, and sickness were their true sentence. I turned around and left, leaving behind the sigh of lives ruined by money. A year later, the storm had passed. The old villa was restored and converted into a small private museum called the Soul's Refuge. There, the antiques that with Langston's and the authorities' help I recovered from all over the world are exhibited. Each piece behind its glass shines with the serene beauty of time like resurrected witnesses. One autumn morning, while the golden sun flooded the patio, I walked through the garden holding little Zion's hand. I had adopted him from an orphanage a few months ago, a boy with bright eyes and a sweet smile. Although the aftermath of the tea prevented me from being a biological mother, I learned that motherhood comes from love and care, not just blood. Zion stopped in front of the display case where I kept the fragments of the fake bowl as a reminder. He looked at me with his big eyes. Mama, why do you keep this broken bowl? It's not as pretty as the others. I crouched down and caressed his hair. Son, this bowl, although broken and fake, taught me the most valuable lesson about truth. Sometimes what shines on the outside isn't gold, and the authentic, even if cracked, is more valuable than a perfect lie. The boy nodded, although perhaps he didn't understand it completely. Then, with the innocence proper to his age, he asked me something that shrank my heart. Mama, and where's my daddy? All my friends have won. I looked at the blue sky, where white clouds floated lazily. The image of Sterling. The pain. Everything had vanished like smoke. I hugged my son, breathing in a scent of childhood, and felt immense peace. Your daddy, sweetheart, is someone who went very far away to pay for his mistakes. But don't be sad, because you have me. You have your grandfather who watches over you from heaven, and you will become a good and honest man, right? Heaven, and you will become a good and honest man, right? Yes, and I will protect you, Mama, Zion said with determination before running off to chase butterflies. I stood up feeling the fresh breeze. The past had closed behind the doors of a prison. The future, radiant and full of hope, opened before me like a new dawn. I had traversed the darkness to find my own light. Justice and happiness are not something you ask for, but something you conquer and build with your own hands. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.